Welcome, everybody, to Football Discussion Daily. My name is Joe, and I'm here with co-host
EGO.
CGO. Today is the 6th of February, 2026, and we are talking about the Man City Liverpool game on Sunday. Let me just read off the fixtures for tomorrow. Well, today Leeds beat Forest 3-1. Spurs are playing United in the first fixture tomorrow. We also have Arsenal, Sunderland, Wolves, Chelsea, Burnley, West Ham, Fulham, Everton, Bournemouth, Villa, and then Newcastle are facing the greatest team in the history of England, Brentford, at the 12:30 fixture. George, we're going to spend the majority of the show on Liverpool, Man City, as you know. The first question is, before we get into that, what is the best fixture tomorrow? Most interesting.
Well, for me, I think I will go for the Arsenal Sunderland game because Arsenal is currently at the top of the table and Sunderland is they are eighth on the table. And if you look at this Sunderland team, it's one team that you have to be very careful with because they can surprise you if you allow them. We've seen them do that against top side. And remember, Sunderland is the only team that is yet to be beaten at home, even though they are not playing at home. But that's a plus for them. It shows how good they are. And for a team that just got promoted and started playing the Premier League this season after a very long time they've been out of the Premier League. I think kudos has to go to the team and to the coach. So I
And
think
George,
that's the game.
what is the worst and least interesting fixture for tomorrow?
Well, we know Burnley is playing West Ham tomorrow. Those two teams are sitting 18 and 19th on the table. So they are battling with, they are in the relegation zone. So for me, it's a relegation battle. So
You
that's
know,
the
George,
game.
I disagree with you on that
Okay.
because Burnley, either Burnley or West Ham are guaranteed points. Is going to make the relegation battle that much more interesting because I think tomorrow is going to be a West Ham win, and I think that's going to heat up that relegation battle, especially if the Nottingham Forest lost today. And so I think that's an interesting game because if West Ham lose, which is one of their last most winnable games for the rest of the year, it just means Nottingham Forest and Leeds and those teams at the bottom are going to be a lot more comfortable. If they win, there's a lot more heat on Newcastle and on those teams in 16th and 17th. So I think it's an interesting game. The most boring game for me is Fulham Everton because I don't feel like either of those teams are really like. I don't think either of those teams have a chance at Europe. I think neither of those teams have a chance at relegation. It's just like who gets 11th and who gets 13th. Is the difference. So that's what I think. I think the title race is more or less over. I don't think Man City is good enough to catch Arsenal this year. Man City is the quality to win individual games. So Arsenal Sunderland, it'd be a fascinating game, but I feel like there's not a lot of pressure. I do feel like Newcastle Brentford are two teams that this is a type of game. This is the difference between Conference League getting sixth or seventh and getting eighth and getting in the Europa League versus Conference League. I think this is a interesting game. I've always felt Newcastle. A month ago, I thought Newcastle was the inside track on that fifth and sixth spot versus given the form of Liverpool, Chelsea, and United. And I'm eating my foot right now. But I do feel like Newcastle could be in that race. I don't think Brentford's good enough to be in the Champions League race, but certainly could be in the Conference League. So I think that's more interesting game for me, just because I feel like that title race is over.
If, if Arsenal eventually wins the league, that means this will be the first time in the Premier League Pep Guardiola will not be winning the Premier League in two consecutive Premier League seasons because that has never happened before since he
Yeah.
came in 2016. So if it happens this time, that means it's something that will be a very big surprise to so many people who has followed how Pep Guardiola has really performed in the Premier League. So
No, George, there was 25 years where Pep didn't win the Premier League before 2016. So, 25 years of Premier League. So, um, there's Premier League before Pep and Premier League after Brett. Now, let's move on to the main topic of discussion, George,
yeah.
because we'll talk about the results tomorrow and we'll have a great discussion. But the biggest game of the weekend, George, by far, if I were to ask you the biggest game of the weekend, is Man City versus Liverpool. Man City, a win could propel them closer to Arsenal, keep that title race tight. Liverpool are right in the mix for that fifth spot, which would likely guarantee Champions League. Fourth guarantees it. Fifth probably does. They're fighting several quality teams, but none of them are consistent. This is a big game. It's at Anfield, where Manchester City have not won They've won once
That was
there in the
2021.
last 20 years, and that was in front of no fans. The last time Manchester City won without fans, George, or with fans in the stadium, do you know when that was?
That was 1936, 1937 season.
No, the last time they won with fans in the stadium was 2003.
2003
The
was
last
the
the time
one
before that
at
was
Anf.
1981. The time before that was 1956. So
Okay.
about once
It,
every 25 years they've won. 2021, I'm going to say it doesn't really count because there's no fans in the stadium. Like
yes.
that was the year Liverpool had like 20 center backs all of their ACLs, and like Jordan Henderson and Fabinho were the center backs. So very different atmosphere at Anfield with fans. But this year I do think it'll be a good game. Both these teams are more flawed than they have been in years past.
Yes.
Both of these teams still have that star power, but maybe not the cohesion. I think Man City might be a part of a transition year with Pep. Liverpool signed a lot of players and hasn't gelled yet. Maybe with the Jota death, maybe that's impacting their intensity this season, and that's no fault of the players. Obviously, it's a very difficult thing to recover from. Could be a lot of reasons, and we've talked about this. George, this game, nothing would surprise me. But what are you looking for Sunday, and what is your prediction?
Well, you've said it. Anfield is not a very favorable ground for Manchester City. In the last 22 Premier League games, both teams have played at Anfield. Manchester City have only been able to get just one win, and that was the one you made reference to in 2021,
No
February. I
fans.
think that was 7th of February 2021. So, and it was played under closed door because I think due to the COVID restriction,
Yes.
that was why that happened. And since then, City has not been able to get any win. So in 22 Premier League games at Anfield, in the last 22 Premier League games at Anfield, Liverpool has won 14. Man City has only won one, and then seven ended in draws. So when you look at that statistics, you see that it doesn't really favor Manchester City in any form. So if we are to go by that, what it shows is that with the way Manchester City has been struggling, they've not been consistent in the Premier League this season. You begin to have doubts if they can really go to Anfield and do a kind of a double, because the last time Manchester City did a double against Liverpool was 1936-1937 season when they won both legs. Remember, City won the first leg at the Etihad Stadium, which ended 3-0. So if they are able to achieve that this time, that means they are doing it for the first time since 1936-1937 season.
But
Now,
there's
the
been
funny,
several times in the past 20 years where Man City's won at the Etihad, had a chance to go to Anfield and do this and lost. I don't know, George. My favorite Man City Liverpool game was probably January 2018. It was right after Liverpool signed Virgil van Dijk, but he was sitting in the stands, and Manchester City they hadn't been beaten yet all season. It was their 100-point season. They were, I forget their exact record, but it was something like 17 wins and 2 draws and 0 losses, something like that. And they came into Anfield and they just got outplayed. The first actually half was very even, but very intense. And then there's about first 15 minutes of that second half, Manchester City completely collapsed. It would be not because they were bad, but because Liverpool were just so good. The atmosphere was so electric. It was one of the greatest things
yes,
I've ever seen in a stadium. And at that time, Klopp, um, you know, he definitely built the team. When they were great, but the consistency wasn't there yet. And at that point, I was like, I can see Klopp. If he gets this consistency, they will be absolutely as good as Manchester City are at that time. And that actually, Klopp did by the end of that year get that consistency with Liverpool. He lost the Champions League final very tightly, and obviously the next 2 seasons were brilliant. But that game was just so incredible. My favorite was when Ederson came out of his box and cleared it to Salah, who just chipped him from 40 yards, and it was just a wonderful game, great atmosphere. And then a couple months later, during the Champions League, I think round of eight, maybe round of 8, I think Man City Liverpool. Liverpool also won. I think the game at Anfield was 3-0. Um, after winning at the Etihad in the first leg. Liverpool won at the first leg 2-1. I could be getting those scores wrong, but it was also great to just beat Man City again. No, they beat Man City. I think it was the first leg was at Anfield, and it was not very close either, and it was just an electric atmosphere. So those are two of my favorites. Do you have a favorite Liverpool Man City game over the years at Anfield?
Well, I think the one I can remember now is just last season's game, the one that took place uh, at Liverpool's ground. And, last season Liverpool had a double against City. That made them win the league. So uh, most times, I won't say I have any favorite one, but most times when City and Man and Liverpool plays, it's always very, very interesting, especially under Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola. The battle is always very close. It's something you look forward to. In fact, the one they played last season, their fixture from last season, even the one they played at Etihad, is not as interesting as what we've seen under Jurgen Klopp. Last season, Liverpool won so easily. City wasn't having it good last season. And then when they both played at Etihad last year, uh, this season, we saw what happened. City had a 3-0 victory. The game it wasn't that kind of keenly contested game we've always seen when Jurgen Klopp was the coach of Liverpool, and then you have Pep Guardiola. It was always a very interesting game when both teams are playing, whether it's in Etihad or whether they are playing at Anfield. It's always very interesting. But let me say, last season and then what I watched this season at Etihad, it wasn't. I didn't see that electrifying um, game that we've normally seen when both teams play. So I must tell you that I'm sure a lot of people will be missing the kind of football we see from Jurgen Klopp, because Jurgen Klopp plays full attacking football. He doesn't mind if you will beat me. No, go ahead and beat me. He's ready to come out and attack and play, and
Klopp
that
really
makes the
knew
game
how
very.
to Klopp really knew how to counter Pep in a lot of ways. I think even in Germany when Klopp had a very inferior squad, Klopp still gave Guardiola fits when he was at Dortmund. At Liverpool, their squads were more equal, and Klopp has one of the better records against Pep in the history in their histories. There's a time where I knew that like Liverpool's whole strategy was to get the ball in the air in the midfield because they had Henderson and Fabinho who were inches taller than De Bruyne, and this is pre-Rodri. Bernardo Silva and David Silva are brilliant players, but aren't very big, aren't very known for their prowess in the air. There's times where Klopp would press and the energy, and Man City, couldn't match it. And eventually Pep would figure these things out, but every game was so different, so tactical. It was probably the most intense and high level that I had seen since the Mourinho Pep in El Clasico games of 10 or 15 years ago. Um, I also think that between Slot and Pep, the difference between him, both managers are brilliant tactically and brilliant emotionally at connecting with their players. But if I'm splitting hairs, Slot is a little more tactical and a little more level-headed at his approach to games. Klopp is much more, let's get everybody involved and let's scream and let's make this an emotional affair. George, you were pointing out that Anfield maybe is a bit more measured with Slot. Liverpool as a club, the players might have a little bit more restrictions on what Slot allows them to do and the instructions he gives them, and the players want to express themselves on the field, and that might be a little more challenging for them. I think it'll be interesting to look out for tomorrow is how the Anfield crowd plays in, or on Sunday. It is a later game, which really helps with the crowd. I know in the past both Slot and Pep have complained about these 12:30 kickoffs, which is 7:30 if you're on the East Coast and 4:30 if you're on the West Coast of US. But the game tomorrow or Sunday is a later game, which I think will really help the atmosphere in the crowd.
One of the things the differences I've observed with the way and slots teams Liverpool's team plays and the way that of Jurgen Klopp tutor team plays is Jurgen Klopp is more attack minded. they are always willing to go out and play. But you see the way Slot's team play, they are more conservative, they are more cautious, and that's why you don't see that high intensity the way you see it in the team Jurgen Klopp had when he was the coach of Liverpool.
No,
So
George, I just say I'll disagree there because what I feel like has happened with Slot is that he came out and played very attacking football from August of 2024 through like January or February of 2025. And a lot of coaches started to figure out how to counter that, counter Klopp's Slot style. And Klopp, over his time at Liverpool, always played attacking. You're right, but he evolved, and he was able to say once the coaches figured him out after like the 2019 season where they got 100 points, they really struggled the next season after they won their first title. Um, he was able to reinvigorate the squad, bring in changes he needed, alter the team, and they had another 90-point season a couple years later. Got to another Champions League final. Slot has not shown that he can do that. The way Pep has reinvented Man City over the years several times. I do feel like Slot will figure that out because he's a smart manager. He hasn't yet. I feel like he could get there this season. We've seen parts of it against Newcastle. They played brilliantly in the second half. But I do feel like Slot does want to bring that. I feel like one of the reasons they've struggled so much as Slot is pushing them so hard to play attacking, and they just don't have the talent. He wants to play attacking philosophically, but hasn't really made the connections on how to do that from a play style wise individually, how to utilize his players. I think he's starting to figure that out and will continue to, but I feel like both managers are very attacking and very entertaining football when they're at their best. Slot has just been figured out by opposing managers a little quicker than Klopp and hasn't been able to adjust.
one interesting thing is that both Manchester City and Liverpool have only had one Premier League win this year. They've lost one. Both of them have lost one games each. Man City lost to Manchester United, while Liverpool lost to Bournemouth. You watched
George,
that game.
really quickly, which team do you feel like needs this game more?
For me, I think City needs it more because they are in the title race, so they really need to win. So they need it
Interesting.
more. But funny enough, Liverpool also needs it because they need to be in the top four. They are fighting to be in the top four. So both teams need the win. But if you ask me, I think Man City needs it more because if they lose that game and Arsenal goes ahead to win Sunderland, that means it's going to be a 9 point gap, and that is as good as Arsenal going home with the trophy.
So last thing I'll mention two last things that I'll gonna look out in this game. I think one of the big decisions here, Gahey is probably guaranteed to start at center back. The other center
Yes,
back I think matters because Diaz has been out for a while. He's on the bench last game.
yes.
He's a very good center back, but I feel like there's a big drop off between him and Kushinov in terms of quality. And I feel like it could be a very different game if Diaz is ready and fit to play 90 minutes versus Kushinov. I think that Liverpool might see that as a player they can attack. So that's number one. Number two, Arne Slot, when he first came to um, England, one of my biggest things that impressed upon me is the adjustments he made at halftime. Several times Liverpool went into halftime 0-0 and then ended up winning games 2-0, 3-1 in the first 6 months of last season. Last game against Newcastle, he adjusted clearly at halftime on several things. It's a pretty even game before half, outside of two moments of brilliance from Ekitike, and Liverpool completely dominated that second half. Man City, we've talked about against Chelsea, against Tottenham, very brilliant in the first half,
Yes.
very
Second
weak in the
half,
second half. So
exactly.
that's something I'm gonna look for tomorrow. Um, just Slot be able to do that. Pep is, I feel like, obviously a brilliant coach, and he's also well aware of that probably trend as well. But we'll see if that happens tomorrow. George, what's one thing that you'll encourage people to look for tomorrow?
Is it tomorrow or
Or
Sunday?
sorry, Sunday.
Well, one thing we must look forward to that is going to be a very interesting game. That's for sure. Because if you look at the quality of players Manchester City has, they have quality, especially in the attack. But like we've always said, the biggest concern is always the defensive department. If they can work on their defensive department very well, then that means they will stand a chance of at least even if they can get a win in that game. But if not, we might likely see what we've seen in the other games against Tottenham, Chelsea, and stuffs like that. So I don't want to see a Manchester City that will play well in the first half, and then in the second half they'll fall like a pack of cards. We don't want to see that on Sunday. So I hope Pep Guardiola can use his intelligence and see how he can tweak things and make Manchester City strong defensively. Because if it is attack, definitely with Haaland, the likes of Ryan Cherki, Anton Semeyo, they have Omar Makmush. Those guys can hurt any defense any day, anytime. But the problem is the defense, and they hold their own when it matters most. So
And like I
that's
said, if they have to play Kushnov instead of Diaz, they might feel a little need to have play more conservative midfield and a little less attack. Those guys up you just mentioned who are very talented might feel a little more isolated if their defense has to be more back. These everything plays into each other. Pep is a brilliant mind. I'm sure he'll figure it out. Let me close out today with a couple of questions. Number one, what do you think is going to win on Sunday? Liverpool or Man City? It's the biggest game of the season. Our biggest game of the weekend. What's the best fixture tomorrow? Who needs the game more, Liverpool or Man City? And what is the worst fixture tomorrow, the most boring fixture? Please let us know your thoughts. Respond on social media. Appreciate everybody. Have a good one. Enjoy your watching.